This is not the Midwest. Not quite. It's not quite the Northeast, not quite Appalachia, and not quite the Mid-Atlantic. And it certainly is not big storm country. This is western Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio, where most people would say the biggest weather nuisance is the snow that comes blowing off Lake Erie before it freezes over. Rarely is the weather here anywhere as destructive or dangerous as it gets in other parts of the country. Across the continent, the Great Plains and the Deep South experience the profound effects of a geographical accident. Air masses influenced by a variety of climate regions are drawn together over the central United States, where they give rise to one of the most fascinating and terrifying natural forces on the planet. For a storm chaser or a scientist, it's one of the most amazing experiences out there, but for most people it's one they hope to never have. And on the last day of spring in 1985, what seemed to many residents of my area like an impossibility arrived with little warning, swift and terrible, leaving its mark for decades after. 2025 marks 40 years since the day Tornado Alley came to my home state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania averages about 16 tornadoes a year, far below places like Texas and Oklahoma. Rarer still are strong tornadoes, those rated EF2 to EF5 on the Fujita scale. Violent tornadoes, EF4 and EF5, are rare even on the Great Plains and occur almost exclusively between the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains. But that's not to say they don't stray toward unexpected places. Looking at Pennsylvania's violent tornado tally over the years, one single day takes a large share. A tornado outbreak requires a specific set of ingredients. There must be ample fuel for the storms in the form of moisture near the ground. There must be an ignition source, a lifting mechanism to jumpstart storm development. And there must be an uneven wind profile in the atmosphere, most amplified at low levels, to get the storms rotating and concentrate that rotation near the ground. And on the morning of Friday, May 31st, 1985, those ingredients were quickly falling into place over the eastern Great Lakes. A low-pressure system centered over Canada had drawn up a humid tropical air mass from the south. Convective energy values over southwest Pennsylvania approached 3,000 joules per kilogram of air. Not unusual for summer storms in the region, but only one piece of the puzzle. The instability index for the Pittsburgh area reached levels typical of a Great Plains supercell event. The unusual feature was the sharp drop-off from humid to dry air along the cold front moving through Ohio. The dry line, the initiation point for rotating supercells on the plains. It provided the agitation to turn pools of highly unstable air into freely rising thunderstorms, and its arrival in this part of the country was a rarity. Finally, the wind shear over the region was extreme. In the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere, the wind turned almost 180 degrees and picked up speed by 30 knots. This low-level wind shear is what turns severe thunderstorms into tornado machines. By mid-afternoon, they exploded to life. First over the farm country of southern Ontario, east of Lake Huron. The result was one of the worst tornado events in Canadian history, and the day had only begun. The next wave of supercell storms fired off on the southern shore of Lake Erie, new storms appearing south along the dry line and sweeping eastward. The National Severe Storms Forecast Center had the area under a tornado watch. It was the duty of the local National Weather Service to follow the storms and issue warnings. Still, nobody could have guessed how it was about to go down. For a region not accustomed to violent weather, where many residents lived under the impression that storms of this magnitude couldn't happen here, a generational catastrophe was in the making. At 5 p.m. it began, a locally unprecedented onslaught of strong to violent tornadoes tearing across northeast Ohio and northwest Pennsylvania. Back then, the weather radar used by forecasters was extremely limited. For a tornado warning to be issued, a tornado had to be reported. At the small town of Albion in northwest Pennsylvania, a volunteer firefighter sees a tornado approaching and sends a last-minute message over the radio to local residents. 10 blocks of town are obliterated. Quickly, another violent twister hits Jamestown, then blows away the tiny village of Atlantic. Then it hits Cochranton, then Cooperstown, then Cherry Tree, flattening homes and taking lives all the way. They grow more substantial. A big twister blows past Union City and Corey, rendering rural farmsteads to piles of lumber and scrap metal. A half-mile-wide tornado roars past Tynesta and across the Allegheny River, uninhibited by the mountains or the steep river gorges. An even larger tornado carries on across the rugged plateau and strikes Kane. All afternoon and into the evening, the storms rage on, moving east as they propagate south. A shopping center is destroyed in Beaver Falls, 30 miles northwest of Pittsburgh, and that tornado hits Evans City and Saxonburg. Tornadoes are everywhere. Word of the unfolding disaster spreads south and east with them, as warnings fill the radio waves and fire station sirens ring out through the woods and over the rolling farmlands. Hail larger than golf balls stirs people out of their homes, where they are met with the sight of a spiraling, sickly green sky. The tornadoes come ripping over the hills, tossing trees and cars through the air, and take off into the country as quickly as they came. Some survivors recalled seeing black smoke rising in the near distance, realizing almost too late what it really was. Others, living below the trees and hillsides, never saw it coming. Some heard it before they saw it. Emergency responders are already racing up and down western Pennsylvania by 6:30. Reports of incredible destruction are popping up from multiple counties, but the worst was still to come. A single event severe enough to become the headliner of the entire regional disaster. The tornado that touched down northwest of Youngstown, Ohio, was stronger than all the rest, a monster that rarely makes an appearance even in Tornado Alley. It was a multiple vortex F5 tornado, with estimated wind speeds well over 200 miles per hour, and it was on course to rip through populated areas. At a quarter-mile wide, it engulfed the small town of Newton Falls, leveling nearly everything in its path. Then it moved quickly through the city of Niles, just between Warren and Youngstown, where it carved a path of vicious devastation through residential areas on par with the strongest tornadoes of the 20th century. It continued through the country toward the state line and became the first and only F5 to ever rage over Pennsylvania soil. It eviscerated the industrial park in Wheatland, narrowly avoiding more neighborhoods in Sharon and Hermitage, showering the surrounding woodlands with sheets of metal torn to ribbons. It finally dissipated just outside of Mercer, Pennsylvania, after traveling 50 miles, persisting for more than an hour and killing 18 people. the deadliest of the entire outbreak. The suddenness and totality of the destruction was incomprehensible to many in the area. It was unimaginable that this could ever happen here. Winds strong enough to scrape the asphalt from a road and tumble giant propane storage structures will irreversibly change a community's future. And yet the day was not through. These storms were a rare breed. Supercells not only capable of producing tornadoes, but large, violent, long-track tornadoes. They dropped multiple tornadoes in sequence, stringing trails of destruction across many counties, the most considerable of which began 90 miles east of Wheatland, near Du Bois, Pennsylvania. Here the rolling farmland ends and meets the high woodlands of the Allegheny Plateau, with its wandering river gorges and sparse population. An hour before sunset, a broad, multi-vortex tornado developed and continued on for an incredible 75 miles across central Pennsylvania through mostly uninhabited, high-elevation wilderness. This radar image was captured at the meteorology department at Penn State University, 30 miles south of the tornado's path. The storm's rotation signature is unmistakable, but what stands out is its size. Its distant fury was evident on the school's seismograph as a faint seismic vibration traveling through the ground. Rolling over the mountains, the tornado was well over a mile wide, at times nearly 2 miles wide. Only a few rural homes were destroyed while it trekked through state forest land, rampaging on into the dark of night, but it still found its way toward unsuspecting people. Some Boy Scouts arrived with their parents at Parker Dam State Park, nestled in the Moshannon State Forest. In their cabin without TV or phones, they were cut off. After the storm seemed to pass, all became calm. They first became aware of something unusual, with a sound described as similar to a freight train, growing steadily louder. Over the trees and hills, they could see nothing. When the giant tornado arrived, it mowed down the surrounding forest. It tore the roof off the cabin, and the campers sheltering inside clung to each other to avoid being blown away. Then it passed, and the campers survived. The sun rose the morning of June 1st and revealed the sight of many tens of thousands of trees flattened or snapped, laying like broken matchsticks along a mile-wide path cut across the middle of Pennsylvania. The massive Moshannon tornado was rated F4. Had it struck a population center, that might have been higher. The region bore the scars of an outbreak of tornadoes, like an animal's claw marks scratched across the earth, visible from space. Today, 40 years later, the visible scars have disappeared, but the memories remain, vivid and hair-raising. Small reminders can still be found, if you know where to look. "21 tornadoes occurred in Pennsylvania on May 31st, 1985. In total, there were 44 between PA, Ohio, New York, and Ontario, leaving 88 people dead, hundreds homeless, and over 1,000 injured, some to an extreme degree. In Pennsylvania and Ohio, there were 8 violent tornadoes, one of them achieving F5. It remains the worst tornado event this part of the country has ever seen. If there's a lesson to be learned from the tornadoes of 1985, it's to expect the unexpected. Tornado safety awareness in this unlikely location was credited with saving lives. Today, weather warnings are more accurate and far more accessible than they were, but events like this will continue to happen, both here in Pennsylvania and in other places that least expect it.